Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And leave a comment with where you are from and what time you are watching. That way YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. And now, let's begin. Long before men carved their first symbols into stone, long before firelight scattered shadows across cave walls, there was a question that hung in the cold air of the ancient wilderness. How did creatures so fierce, so powerful, and yet so bound to family and pack, rise to rule the forests and plains? The direwolf was not just an animal of flesh and fur. It was a story that walked on four legs, a living riddle, carrying within it the silence of frozen nights and the thunder of the hunt. Picture yourself standing at the edge of a wide, untamed valley. The year is not marked by numbers, but by the passing of seasons, the rise and fall of ice, the endless chase between predator and prey. The air tastes sharp, almost metallic, as if every breath is scraped from stone. The wind is heavy with the smell of pine resin, of damp earth pressed under snow. Ahead, in the half-light of a fading sun, you see them. A pack of direwolves, larger than any wolf you have known, their shoulders nearly reaching the chest of a man, their teeth made for crushing bone, their eyes glowing with the reflection of fire that has not yet been invented. They move like shadows stitched to the ground, each paw pressing into the soil with quiet certainty. You hear the crunch of frost beneath them, the huff of steam from their lungs. There is rhythm in their motion. One leads, the others follow, but not blindly. Every step is weighed, every glance measured, as though they share one thought stretched between many bodies. For early people, who lived with nothing but the tools carved from flint and the courage carved from necessity, the direwolf was both terror and teacher. Imagine crouching inside a crude shelter of branches, the fire sputtering, your stomach hollow with hunger. Beyond the flames, you hear them. The howl rises, deep and thunderous, vibrating through your ribs. It is not just sound. It is a presence, a warning that the night belongs to others. Fear shivers across your skin, but so does awe. How can a creature so deadly also be so perfectly bound to its kin, never alone, never lost? The mystery of the direwolf's rise was not only in their size or strength. Many animals were larger then, mammoths with tusks like curved trees, short-faced bears towering above men. What set the direwolf apart was not just power, but strategy. They hunted together, not as a crowd, but as a chorus. Each member of the pack had a role. Some flanked silently through the brush, their paws muffled by snow. Others pressed forward, pushing herds of ancient bison or horses into chaos. The leader waited for the right moment, when the rhythm of fear broke into disorder. Then, with a rush like a storm breaking, they struck. Early humans, too, understood the value of cooperation. In the direwolf, they saw a mirror of their own survival. Both man and wolf learned that the world did not bend for the solitary. It bent for those who moved together, who shared hunger and danger alike. And so the direwolf became more than predator. It became a symbol etched into the human mind, woven into stories told by flickering light, long before written words existed. Close your eyes for a moment. Hear the crackle of a fire, smell the thick smoke caught in animal hides. Taste the bitterness of dried roots chewed slowly to stave off hunger. In that circle of warmth, the people listen. A hunter tells of a direwolf he saw at dawn, standing on a ridge, its first silver with frost. He swears the wolf was not just watching the herds below, but watching him, measuring, almost as though it knew the same hunger, the same patience. The children shiver, half with fear, half with wonder. To them, the direwolf is not only flesh and bone, but spirit, guardian, rival, teacher all at once. Yet there was always danger. Meeting a pack unprepared meant death. Bones cracked under jaws built to crush. Blood steamed on snow. But human memory does not cling only to terror. It weaves terror into meaning. The direwolf became a creature of stories, its howl a thread between worlds. In dreams, it walked beside hunters, showing them paths through the forest, teaching them when to strike and when to wait. Some tribes painted its likeness in ochre and ash, hoping to borrow its strength. Others wore its teeth as charms, pressing them to their lips before battle. The rise of the direwolf in the ancient wilderness was not only a rise in number, but a rise in meaning. The land itself seemed to honor them. Their prints sank deep into riverbanks, side by side with the marks of mammoths and saber-toothed cats. Their kills fed more than their own kind. Scavenger birds circled above, foxes and men alike followed the traces of their hunts. Life and death spiraled together, and at the center of it often stood the direwolf. But imagine also the silence after. A kill finished, the pack lying in a circle around the bones, licking blood from their fur. The air smells of iron and musk. Snow falls gently, covering the scene as though the earth itself wished to forget the violence. A man approaches later, careful, reverent. He touches the cracked bones, still warm, and learns. He learns where the pack struck, how they chose their moment. In time, he carries this lesson into his own hunt. There is something almost tender in this exchange between man and beast, an unspoken dialogue carved into instinct. The direwolf never meant to teach, yet it did. Humans never meant to worship, yet they did. Out of fear grew respect, and out of respect grew story. Centuries passed. The world shifted. Ice withdrew, forests spread, rivers cut new paths. Prey grew scarcer, and with it the reign of the direwolf trembled. Other wolves, smaller, quicker, more adaptable, moved into the changing land. But memory is stubborn. Even as their numbers dwindled, the direwolf lived on in whispers. Picture yourself again at the edge of that valley. The pack you once saw has thinned. Their coats are ragged, their eyes sharper with hunger. The air tastes different now, warmer, carrying the scent of new growth. Still they endure. Still they move together. When they howl, the sound echoes as it always has, rolling across the hills like thunder, stirring something deep in your chest. And even as time carried them toward their end, people carried them forward in story. To dream of a direwolf was to dream of strength that could not be broken, of loyalty that could not be divided. Warriors painted them on their shields long after the creatures themselves had vanished. Poets spoke of them as guides into the shadowed world of death. Children heard their howls in the wind and felt less alone. Today, when we dig into the earth and pull free a skull with jaws wide enough to shatter stone, we are reminded that they were real, not only symbols. You can run your hand along the fossil and almost feel the heat of their breath, the rasp of their fur. You can almost hear the crunch of bones between their teeth. Science names them Canis dirus, the terrible wolf, but people knew them as something more, something between terror and kinship. What does it mean that such a creature rose so high and then disappeared? Perhaps it is a reminder that strength alone does not secure survival. The direwolf was mighty, but it was bound to an age of giants. When the world shifted, it could not shift quickly enough. Smaller wolves endured because they could bend, and sometimes bending is stronger than breaking. And yet, in another way, the direwolf never vanished. Its spirit threads through our imagination, through the stories we still tell. Close your eyes once more. Imagine the silence of a midnight forest, broken suddenly by a howl so deep it shakes your bones. Imagine seeing glowing eyes at the treeline, feeling the prickle of fear across your skin, and knowing that you are both hunter and hunted. In that moment, the ancient wilderness is alive again. The rise of the direwolf is not only a story of biology or extinction. It is a story of reflection, of how humans saw themselves mirrored in a beast that lived and died by the pack. It is about hunger, survival, family, and the unspoken bond between man and animal that stretches across ages. Their paws no longer press into the snow, yet we still walk in their shadow. When we tell stories of loyalty, of strength, of endurance, we are, in some small way, still speaking of the direwolf. And perhaps, somewhere in the echo of the earth, in the wind that carries across empty valleys, they still answer. What did it feel like to wake within a direwolf pack, to breathe their air, to move in rhythm with their heavy paws pressing against the soil of the ancient world? That question drifts across time, luring us back into an age when winter was a true tyrant and survival meant more than cleverness, it meant belonging. Picture yourself lying in the hollow of a wind-battered plain. The grass bends beneath frost, rattling like dry bones when the gusts sweep across. Around you, warmth hums from thick fur pressed close, a living circle of protection. The smell of damp earth and musk rises with every exhale from the pack, their breath clouds fusing with yours until you cannot tell where you end and they begin. You listen, ears filled with the steady rhythm of lungs, the faint shuffle of paws stretching in the dark, the muted whine of a youngster dreaming in sleep. This is dawn in the life of direwolves, creatures larger and broader than the wolves we know today, their jaws powerful enough to crack through the leg bone of a bison. The world outside the warmth is harsh. Ice and snow do not forgive the slow or the weak. To live here is to understand patience and hunger as constant companions. Direwolves learned it well. They did not move alone but together, weaving their lives into a pack's heartbeat. Morning meant not rushing out into the cold but testing the air first, lifting heavy heads, tasting the breeze for a hint of prey. Smell told the truth long before sight. The metallic tang of blood, the sour edge of fear, the sweetness of crushed grass where herds had passed. When the time came to rise, it was not a quiet stirring but a ripple of movement, shoulders brushing, tails sweeping, paws sinking into frozen ground. Imagine the crunch beneath your feet, ice shards scattering as weight presses down. The sun, still weak on the horizon, paints their fur in streaks of silver and ash. There is no speech, only signals. One wolf lowers its head, another flicks its ear, a third freezes mid-step to test a sound on the wind. Communication is wordless but clear. Each member knows its role, sharpened by countless hunts and the lessons of scarcity. Food is never guaranteed. In the direwolf's world, death is frequent and hunger can stretch across weeks. But the pack moves with discipline, for they have learned that survival is not in the strength of one, but the coordination of many. Picture the chase, the thunder of hooves from giant bison or horses, the pounding rhythm of direwolf bodies surging forward, breath burning in throats, the sharp taste of blood rising before a kill is even made. The air fills with noise, snorts, growls, the breaking crash of prey struggling against teeth and claws. It is brutal, yes, but not mindless. They do not kill for sport. Every drop of blood carries the weight of survival. Once the prey is down, the ritual of feeding begins. Dominant wolves eat first, cracking bones with jaws that echo like snapping branches. The younger ones wait, watching, licking their muzzles, patience stitched into their skin by necessity. When at last they feed, the meat is raw, warm, rich with iron. Imagine the taste, thick, coppery, overwhelming, yet life-giving. To eat is not pleasure alone, but continuation of the pack's bond. A shared meal that ties them together tighter than any rope. But life in the pack is not only about hunting. Between the hunger and the chase lies the quiet, the slower rhythm of daily existence. Resting comes in layers, heads tucked under tails, paws stretched across another's back. Grooming is done with gentle licks, teeth carefully combing through fur. Pups play, tumbling with clumsy paws, their yips carrying across the plain like sparks of joy in a cold land. The older wolves watch, their amber eyes narrowing not from annoyance but from memory, remembering when they too had carried that unspent energy in their bodies. Night brings another shift in the senses. The world grows hushed, save for the low howl that rises like smoke against the stars. It is not just a call, but a thread binding them across the distance. A howl tells of presence, of territory, of unity. Imagine standing within it, your chest vibrating with the sound, the night air filled with a haunting chorus that shivers across your skin. Each note carries meaning. Here we are, together, unbroken. Humans who lived alongside these beasts understood the sound well. For them, direwolves were more than competitors for prey. They were symbols of endurance, mirrors of their own struggles. Cave paintings whisper of wolf-like figures, jaws exaggerated, bodies looming larger than life. To imagine them was to wrestle with the mystery of survival itself. Some may have envied their unity, the way they relied not on tools or fire, but on one another. Others feared their strength, for a human alone was no match against a pack in hunger's grip. And yet, respect wove itself into fear. Bones of direwolves have been found near human settlements, not always as remains of prey, but sometimes laid carefully, as if honored. Could it be that humans saw in them something worth admiring? Discipline, loyalty, a relentless will to live. Perhaps when fires burned low and shadows lengthened across stone walls, stories were told of the direwolf not as monster, but as teacher. To live as they did was to endure, to guard one another, to find strength in the circle rather than the self. The sensory world of the direwolf was sharper than ours. Where we rely on sight, they tasted the air. Every breeze carried information. Every shift in a herd's pace told them of opportunity or danger. Their touch, too, was language. A nudge to move forward, a paw laid across a sibling to soothe, the press of bodies in sleep telling each member, "You belong, you are not alone." For us, who so often chase solitude, it is a reminder of the primal comfort of closeness. Still, there was hardship within the pack. Not every pup lived through the bitter cold. Not every hunt ended in success. Hunger carved bones thin. Fights broke out when desperation clawed too deep. Even unity has limits. Yet even in these struggles lies the lesson. Survival is not perfection but persistence. A direwolf pack could fail one day, and still, they rose the next, moving together again, trying, always trying. Imagine the silence after a failed hunt. The long walk back across snow, paws dragging, ribs visible beneath fur. The smell of disappointment lingers, sharp and acrid, but no one speaks of it. They know the truth without words. Tomorrow the herd may return, or perhaps the ice will thaw, revealing new trails. There is no giving up, only moving forward. Now consider how the world has changed. Direwolves, once spread across 2 continents, vanished into extinction about 10,000 years ago. The climate shifted, prey herds dwindled, and new predators, human and otherwise, rose in dominance. Yet the image of the direwolf remains with us, pressed into bone and myth. Their daily lives, so simple and so brutal, still whisper lessons into our ears. When you picture yourself there, among them, you feel the pull of something older than language. The warmth of the pack in the cold, the rumble of paws shaking the earth, the taste of iron on the tongue. You sense what it means to be bound not by choice but by need, to trust that survival depends on the circle around you. It is a reminder that we too once lived closer to those rhythms, guided by instinct, reliant on one another. Even now, when wolves howl across distant forests, a shadow of that ancient sound echoes back. It is not only theirs but ours too, a memory of a shared world, of nights when we listened from the safety of firelight, imagining the pack moving through the darkness. The direwolf is gone, but the questions it left remain. How do we endure together? How do we keep our place within the circle? How do we honor the bonds that mean survival? The daily life of the direwolf was never just about hunting or resting. It was about belonging. It was about the unspoken language of fur against fur, breath against breath, the eternal rhythm of waking, roaming, feeding, sleeping. Picture yourself there once more, beneath the wide cold sky, pressed close within the circle, the ancient heartbeat of the pack steady against the silence. You feel it in your bones, a rhythm that carries forward unbroken, waiting for us still in the stories we tell. Picture yourself standing in a wide and ancient plain, where the horizon rolls away like a tide of grass and distant hills. The air is sharp and cool, tinged with the faint musk of wild animals and the earthy weight of damp soil. A single question rises, one that has lingered across centuries. How did the direwolf, larger and more powerful than its modern cousins, come to master its hunts and choose the prey that sustained it? The bones alone tell part of the story. Massive jaws, thickened limbs, teeth built not only for slicing but for crushing. Yet bones do not whisper of strategy, of decision-making, of the silent communication between hunters that made survival possible. To know that we must step back into the rhythm of their world, into a time when survival was never granted but always fought for. Imagine the silence before the chase. A pack of direwolves gathers at the edge of the tree line. Their paws press softly into the loam, their bodies tense yet still, only the faint fog of their breath betraying life in the cold dusk air. Their ears twitch, straining toward the plains where herds graze. Bison, ground sloths, perhaps even a young mammoth, each a possibility, each a gamble. To take one meant food, warmth, and survival. To fail meant hunger, exhaustion, or death. It was never random. The direwolf's choice of prey was deliberate, shaped by millennia of necessity. They sought the weak, the young, the old, the edges of the herd where defenses faltered. Just as human hunters learned to read animal movements, direwolves read the language of muscle and gait. A limp in the leg, a hesitation in stride, a slight lagging behind the herd, all became signals, invitations even, to begin the dance of predator and prey. Close your eyes and feel it. The sudden rush of motion, the pounding of heavy paws on frozen ground, the thunder of hooves scattering in panic. The sound swells, overwhelming, snorts of bison, cracking of branches, the sharp exhalations of wolves as they push forward with relentless drive. The world shrinks to a tunnel of motion and sound. In that moment, every sense is heightened. The smell of sweat, iron-rich and pungent, drifts from the herd. The taste of dust fills the throat, dry and bitter, stirred by countless hooves. Eyes fix on the target, muscles burn with the strain of pursuit, and time feels stretched thin, like a bowstring drawn to its limit. For the direwolf, cooperation was not a luxury but a law. Unlike the solitary big cats of their time, direwolves thrived by working in unison. They spread out like a net, flanking their quarry, steering it with silent intention toward a fatal mistake. A stumble on uneven ground, a misjudged turn, and the end would come swiftly. Their jaws, stronger than any modern wolf's, closed with bone-snapping force. Where others tore at flesh, direwolves crushed through sinew and marrow, claiming not only the meat but the hidden fat and nutrients locked within. Humans, too, watched these hunts. They were not merely bystanders but rivals, sometimes companions in spirit, sometimes competitors for the same prey. To early people, direwolves embodied both awe and fear. The pack was a mirror of their own clans, organized, bound by unseen rules, driven by survival. Around firelight, stories may have risen, of wolves that hunted not just with teeth but with a cunning equal to man's, of spirits that took wolf form to punish or to guide. Their howls carried across the night like warnings, songs that curled through the darkness and pressed against the skin, raising the hairs on the back of the neck. Imagine yourself there, crouched at the edge of a fire, hearing that long, mournful call echo from the hills. The crackling of flames seems suddenly small, fragile against the wild chorus beyond. You smell smoke mixed with animal fat roasting, the comfort of safety contrasted against the sharp reminder that other hunters roam the dark. You taste the meat, charred yet rich, and wonder if the wolves, too, are eating well tonight. The direwolf's prey was vast, yet not limitless. They followed the herds, moving as the seasons shifted, adapting to the migrations that swept across the Ice Age landscape. In winters, they would shadow the bison that dug through snow for the last blades of grass. In summers, they would test the calves, the vulnerable ones straying just far enough from the protection of the herd. Sometimes they gambled for larger prizes, giant ground sloths, formidable with claws that could gut a predator in an instant. A risky hunt, but hunger has a way of dulling hesitation. The choice of prey was always a balance between effort and reward, between danger and survival. We can almost feel their hunger, can we not? That ache deep in the belly, twisting and gnawing, driving them forward. To live in their world was to accept hunger as a constant companion. Even in victory, the satisfaction was brief. A carcass stripped clean would leave only bones and silence, and soon the cycle began again. For humans reflecting later on these wolves, there was symbolism in that hunger. The direwolf became more than just a predator. It became a lesson about endurance, about taking only what could be claimed through strength and unity. The image of the pack, moving with a single purpose, taught something about kinship and loyalty. Yet it also warned of the dangers of greed. Take too much, and the herds dwindled, the land emptied, and the wolves themselves starved. Picture the aftermath of a hunt. The air heavy with the metallic tang of blood, ravens circling, waiting for scraps. The pack, muzzles stained red, their fur spiked with gore, pressing in to tear and swallow before the scavengers dared approach. The ground is littered with tufts of hair, with broken branches, with churned soil where the chase reached its climax. And then, as quickly as it began, silence. Only the crackle of bones beneath teeth, the crunch that once echoed like thunder now reduced to steady, rhythmic grinding. To touch this scene is to feel the roughness of dried grass under palm, the stickiness of blood soaking into earth, the warmth radiating from still living flesh even as the spirit of the prey ebbs away. It is raw, unfiltered survival, a reminder of how thin the line between life and death has always been. There is also a psychological echo to consider. For the direwolf, the chase was not only physical but mental. To coordinate as a group required instinct sharpened to near telepathy, knowing when to sprint, when to veer, when to close in. For humans watching, it may have seemed like magic. For us today, it reminds us of the power of collaboration, how survival has always depended on trust and timing as much as on strength. Yet even the mightiest hunters fall. When the great herds dwindled at the close of the Ice Age, when climate shifted and prey grew scarce, the direwolf strategies could no longer save it. Their powerful jaws, once their greatest asset, became a limitation. They were too specialized, too tied to the great herbivores that vanished. Humans, with their tools and fire and growing numbers, adapted quickly, but the direwolf remained bound to its old ways. And so, slowly, their howls faded from the night. Still, their memory lingers. In the crack of a branch at dusk, in the golden eyes of a modern wolf, in the stories we tell of loyalty, cunning, and the relentless hunger that drives all living things. Even now, if you close your eyes in the stillness of a forest, you might imagine them near, a shadow slipping through the trees, a presence just beyond sight. You might feel the press of unseen eyes, the weight of an ancient predator watching, calculating, deciding. The direwolf's hunting strategies and prey choices were not just mechanics of survival. They were expressions of life at its sharpest edge. They remind us that survival is rarely about strength alone, but about timing, unity, and the wisdom to know what can be risked and what must be left behind. And so, as we walk in our own world of noise and light, we carry echoes of theirs. The hunger for survival may take new forms, yet it is the same hunger that drove the direwolf across frozen plains, that guided its choices, that bound its pack together. In quiet moments, we can still sense it, the pulse of wildness that has never fully left us, the ancient whisper that once belonged to direwolves, now folded into the marrow of memory. Why do some creatures vanish from the earth, leaving behind only bones, whispers, and shadows of memory? The direwolf, larger, heavier, and more fearsome than any wolf alive today, once roamed the wide grasslands and frozen valleys of the Ice Age. Yet, despite its strength and cunning, it disappeared, leaving us to wonder, what causes even the most powerful hunters to fade into silence? Picture yourself standing on a plain some 15,000 years ago. The air is sharp and cold, carrying the faint bite of frost even under a pale sun. The horizon stretches endlessly, a mix of rolling tundra and stands of spruce. Herds of bison shift like dark waves across the distance, their breath steaming in the chill. You hear them before you see them, the direwolves' deep, rolling howls that vibrate in your chest like a drumbeat. A pack moves as one body, heavy paws pressing into the snow, their breath clouds merging with the wind. They are alive with purpose, a family bound by survival, sharper and hungrier than the wolves we know now. And yet, in time, their voices fell quiet. The mystery is not only biological but deeply human, for people of that age lived side by side with the direwolf. Hunters crossing valleys would hear them in the night and stoke their fires higher. Mothers would hush their children, listening for the snap of branches that meant a pack had drawn close. People feared them, yes, but also admired them, weaving their likeness into story and symbol. A direwolf's skull might rest at the threshold of a dwelling, a warning or perhaps a blessing. Its teeth, strung together, could hang around the neck of a shaman. To walk among direwolves was to walk among forces of nature, equal parts terror and respect. So what broke this balance? As the Ice Age waned, the world shifted under every creature's feet. The climate grew warmer. Grasses changed. Rivers swelled and shrank in unpredictable rhythms. The great herds that had once fed countless mouths, mammoth, giant sloth, camel, horse, began to vanish. For a predator like the direwolf, specialized in bringing down large, heavy prey, this meant famine creeping in like a slow fog. Imagine the taste of meat turning scarce, the lean months stretching into lean years. A direwolf's massive jaws, built to crush bone, were less suited for chasing smaller, swifter animals. The very advantage that once gave them dominance now tethered them to hunger. At the same time, humans grew bolder. With spears tipped in stone and later in bone, they learned to hunt not only for themselves but against competitors. People drove herds into ravines, set traps in snowy passes, and guarded their kills with fire and noise. Picture the clash, a pack of direwolves circling at the edge of torchlight, their eyes reflecting amber and green, muscles tense with longing. The humans stand shoulder to shoulder, shouting, rattling spears against wood, the smoke of burning pine stinging their nostrils. The smell of roasted meat fills the air, but it belongs to the humans, not to the wolves. Stories of these encounters lingered. Around fires, people spoke of direwolves as guardians of the underworld, spirits who came to carry away the weak. Some believed their howls pierced not only the air, but the barrier between life and death. To dream of a direwolf was to stand at a crossroads, fate watching from the dark. Children grew up with these tales pressed into their ears like charms, equal parts warning and wonder. But outside the circle of firelight, reality pressed harder. Packs starved. Pups cried for milk that never came. Snow carried the smell of decay, of animals collapsing in the frost before they reached spring. Direwolves may have fought each other more fiercely, struggling over scraps. Where once their calls had filled the night, silence began to spread, a silence as heavy as stone. Imagine walking through such a silence. The snow beneath your boots squeaks with every step. The wind moves through dead grass, hissing softly. No distant bellow of mammoth, no low rumble of direwolf song. The land feels larger, emptier, lonelier. You taste the cold air on your tongue, and it tastes like absence, thin, sharp, hollow. Some say disease may have played its hand, carried by other canines or prey animals. A sickness of blood or breath, sweeping through packs that lived so tightly bound. One wolf coughing, another limping, and soon the whole family failing. When you think of them in this way, not only as predators but as families, mothers, fathers, siblings, their loss feels not just ecological but intimate. Their dens once smelled of musk and warmth, of damp fur and crushed grass. Now those hollows sank into emptiness, filled with nothing but dust and snow. And still, they lived on in people's minds. Long after the last direwolf took its final breath, humans remembered. The bones left in tar pits and caves whispered of their shape, broad skulls, heavy jaws, teeth like chisels. Children growing up thousands of years later would trace their fingers across those relics and imagined creatures larger than any wolf they'd ever seen. Poets and storytellers gave them names, painting them as guardians, hunters, even companions in some imagined past. The direwolf crossed from flesh into myth, finding a second life in story. Close your eyes and picture the last pack. Maybe they stood on a ridge at sunset, the sky painted with streaks of red and gold. Their coats thick, rough, marked with scars of old battles. They smell the earth, the faint tang of pine, the musk of deer drifting on the wind. But the deer are fewer now, the great herd's gone. Hunger gnaws at them. They lift their heads and howl, not only to call to each other, but to call to the world itself, as if asking why. Their voices echo across the empty valley, bounce off cliffs, roll into the sky. Then the echo fades. That sound, once so common, grows rare until it is no more. And here we are, thousands of years later, listening for echoes. The direwolf is gone, yet in a way it lingers. In our stories, in our symbols, in the way we look at modern wolves and feel both awe and unease. Their extinction reminds us how fragile strength can be. Even the fiercest jaws cannot hold back a changing world. Even the most cunning hunter cannot outlast vanishing prey. The lesson drifts across time like smoke from an ancient fire. Survival is not only about power but about change, and those who cannot bend must break. But also their memory gives us something tender. To think of them is to think of the weight of history pressing against our present. To imagine their paws pressing into snow where cities now stand, their howls rolling over plains where highways now stretch. Their story tells us that the world has always been shifting, and we are only the latest wanderers passing through. When you listen to the wind on a lonely night, when it moans through trees or whistles across open ground, you might catch the ghost of that old sound. A reminder that once, direwolves ruled here. A reminder that everything we know is temporary, yet nothing is ever fully lost. Picture yourself standing on the edge of a vast plain, the wind curling over tall grasses, carrying with it the faint musk of wild animals and the sharp bite of cold earth. The question rises quietly in your mind, almost like an echo from the bones buried beneath your feet. How did direwolves, those heavy-bodied, thick-jawed predators, hold themselves together as more than mere hunters? What bound them into packs so strong that they endured ice, famine, and the long struggle against time itself? It is easy to see teeth and muscle, to imagine the chase and the kill, but it is harder to picture the invisible cords of loyalty and care that stitch their lives into one fabric. Yet without those bonds, without the unseen threads of cooperation and trust, their story would have been shorter, dimmer, and far less remarkable. Imagine a winter night when the air is glassy and still. Snow lies heavy across the ground, muffling sound, but beneath the silence there is movement. A cluster of direwolves huddles close, the warmth of their fur pressing one body against another. Each exhale curls into the night like smoke. One wolf licks the frost from the muzzle of another, a simple act, but one that tells you something far greater. They were not just killers of the plains, but caretakers of one another. Science, sifting through tar pits and fossils, shows the blunt strength of their jaws, the weight of their bones, but even those remains whisper of community. Healed fractures tell of wolves who had once been broken but lived long enough to mend. Lived because others must have fed them when they could not hunt, protected them when they could not run. To survive injury in the Ice Age was to depend on the hands, or rather the teeth, of kin. Picture yourself crouching low, watching from the shelter of a spruce. The smell of pine sap sticks in your nose, sharp and resinous. You hear the shuffle of paws over hard snow, the deep growl that is less a threat than a reassurance, a signal to the pack. We are together, we are safe. The wolves stretch their limbs, brushing against one another in small touches that steady the spirit as much as the body. You realize that every glance, every brush of fur against fur, was a language of its own. And what was that language made of? Not words, but patterns of sound and silence. A low whine from a pup that drew food from the belly of an elder. The rumble of approval when a hunt succeeded. The snap of teeth that taught discipline to the young. Even the howl, a long, rising note that braided through the air like smoke, was more than sound. It was a rope thrown across distance, binding the pack even when shadows stretched long between them. The howl, when you think about it, was both practical and sacred. It marked territory, warned rivals, and summoned scattered members back to the fold. But it also carried something older, something that spoke to the fear of being lost. Imagine yourself alone on the plain, darkness pressing close, and then you hear it, a voice, familiar and steady, calling through the night. You would answer, not just out of duty, but out of relief. For humans of that era, listening from firelit camps. The howl must have stirred a shiver that was half dread and half recognition. They too understood the pull of the group, the comfort of not being alone in the dark. It is no wonder, then, that the direwolf came to dwell in our myths and stories, not merely as a predator, but as a symbol of kinship and endurance. Consider the hunt itself. It was not a simple rush, not the chaos of beasts each for themselves. It was patterned, coordinated, shaped by trust. One group drove prey forward, heavy hooves clattering on frozen soil. Another cut off escape, jaws ready. You can almost taste the iron tang of blood in the air, feel the ground trembling beneath pounding bodies. The kill, when it came, was shared. Each wolf waited its turn, sometimes snapping, sometimes yielding, but always returning to a balance that kept the pack whole. This sharing was more than survival. It was ritual. The weakest were fed, the pups nudged toward meat they could barely chew. Mothers watched with sharp eyes, tails brushing against small flanks to reassure them. The elders, slower now, still claimed their portion, not because they could fight for it, but because the pack made space for them. What kind of world is it where even the fading are honored with food and warmth? It is a world where bonds matter as much as claws. The scent of that world must have been rich and thick, fur wet with snow, the copper tang of fresh blood, the earthy musk of bodies pressed close in a den. Imagine curling up there, your cheek against coarse fur, the sound of steady breathing around you. Touch becomes language too. The nudge of a muzzle, the press of a flank, the grooming tongue that sweeps dirt away and leaves the skin beneath tingling and warm. Psychologists today might call it attachment, trust, or cooperation. But those words feel clinical compared to what the wolves themselves must have felt. The relief of not being abandoned, the simple joy of a familiar presence. A pup learning to walk knew the circle of bodies around it would not break. An injured hunter could limp home and find food waiting. In a land of scarcity, that was wealth beyond measure. Humans watching them may have learned more than they realized. Around campfires, our ancestors must have told stories of wolves who protected their own, who punished betrayal, who sang across the night sky to call each other home. Those stories slipped into culture, shaping totems, carvings, and later the legends that painted wolves as both feared rivals and admired kin. The direwolf, larger and more formidable than its gray cousin, stood as a figure of loyalty sharpened by power. If you close your eyes now, you can almost hear the crackle of that campfire, feel the warmth on your face while the cold presses hard at your back. The air smells of smoke and fat sizzling on embers. Somewhere beyond the firelight, a howl arcs through the darkness. It is not just an animal sound, it carries into the marrow, stirring both caution and a strange comfort. The people lean closer to each other, mirroring what the wolves themselves do in their dens. And so the bonds of the direwolf ripple outward, teaching not only their own kind, but ours as well. The idea that strength lies not in the single body, but in the circle of bodies, in the chain of care. Even in death, the fossils tell this tale. Skulls lined beside one another, bones overlapping as though the pack lingered still. Scientists trace the healed scars and see stories of sacrifice and survival. Poets, in their own way, trace the same lines and see loyalty. What, then, do we carry from them into our present? Perhaps it is the instinct that family is chosen as much as it is born. That survival is sweeter when shared. That the sound of a familiar voice calling across distance can steady a heart better than food or fire. Picture yourself walking a forest trail today. The air is damp, mossy, and you can taste the cool greenness on your tongue. A dog trots at your side, glancing up at you with eyes that are both wild and familiar. In that gaze lies the echo of direwolves, the bonds that held them together now living in the quiet trust between you and the animal who walks beside you. You feel the brush of fur against your leg, the warmth of shared breath. It is not so different from the den on that winter plain thousands of years ago. The story never truly ends. The direwolf, though gone, lingers in our imagination, reminding us that teeth and strength mattered, but what mattered more was the unseen web of care, of shared survival, of voices carried through the dark. Listen closely, and you may still hear it, a long note rising, not of fear, not of hunger, but of belonging. Imagine standing at the edge of a winter forest, breath fogging in the air, the snow groaning faintly beneath your boots. The world is hushed, yet not silent. Somewhere out there, beyond the curtain of trees, you feel the weight of a presence. A question stirs. Why does the image of the direwolf, an animal that has not walked this earth for more than 10,000 years, still cling so tightly to the human imagination? Why does its shadow still stretch across stories, symbols, and even our dreams? Picture yourself seated by a fire, a crackling hearth in a darkened room, the smell of wood smoke curling around you. Someone begins to tell a tale of the Ice Age, when beasts larger than life roamed the earth. Mastodons trumpeted through frosted valleys, giant ground sloths lumbered in the shadow of cliffs, and among them padded the direwolf. Broad-shouldered, thick-jawed, eyes sharpened with hunger, it was not just a wolf but something older, heavier, more relentless. Its paws pressed into the same frozen earth our ancestors walked. Imagine the sound of those paws crunching on icy ground, the sharp breath of a pack weaving through the night like smoke, their howls carrying across open plains where survival itself was a constant gamble. The mystery begins with bones, unearthed by accident in tar pits, caves, and riverbeds. Thousands of direwolf remains have been found in places like Rancho La Brea in California, their teeth still bared as though they never stopped hunting. For centuries, humans looked at those skulls and wondered what kind of wolf had lived before wolves as we know them. The direwolf's jaw was broader, its bite crushing, built to snap the bones of bison, horse, or mammoth. Yet for all its power, it vanished while the smaller gray wolf endured. The puzzle troubled scientists and storytellers alike. Why did the mightiest wolf disappear while its kin lived on? To imagine the answer, return to the Ice Age world. The wind is bitter, carrying with it the scent of musk oxen, mammoths, and wet soil thawing in brief summers. The direwolf's pack, 30, perhaps 40 strong, fans out across the tundra, each animal brushing past another, shoulders heavy with muscle, for thick enough to resist the cold. Their unity was their weapon. Alone, a direwolf would have struggled against beasts many times its size. Together, they struck like a storm. Imagine the thundering of hooves as a bison herd panicked under their pursuit, the air filled with dust, the taste of iron-rich blood when prey finally collapsed beneath the pack's relentless weight. Humans, too, lived in that world, their fires burning low against the dark. Hunters with stone points lashed to wooden shafts, families huddled in furs, the smell of marrow simmering in hide pots. They would have known the direwolf as rival and threat. A kill left unguarded might draw the pack. Footsteps in snow might be shadowed by paw prints doubling them. Imagine the fear of hearing distant howls when your weapons are few and your camp is small. Yet, there must also have been awe. For what creature embodied survival more than the direwolf? Its strength became an unspoken measure. If you could imagine defeating a direwolf, you could imagine triumphing over hunger, cold, and even death itself. When extinction came, it was not with a single blow. Climate warmed, prey shifted, landscapes changed. The bison that once thundered in countless numbers dwindled. Mammoths fell silent. The direwolf, built for massive quarry, found itself hunting ghosts. Meanwhile, humans with their spears, their traps, their coordination with fire and voice flourished. Imagine the confusion of a pack nosing through snow, finding no herd, only silence. Hunger gnawed. The scent of humans grew stronger, while the scent of prey faded. Over time, the direwolf slipped away, leaving only bones and tar and whispers in memory. Yet bones are not where stories end. People did not forget. Around campfires, in stone etchings, and later in myths, the direwolf lived on. Its image blended with that of the gray wolf, its successor, and became a figure both feared and respected. Picture the flicker of firelight on cave walls, shadows stretching long. A storyteller gestures to the dark outside and speaks of wolves as spirits, guardians, or enemies. The direwolf may have been gone in flesh, but in imagination, it grew even larger. Cultures across the world gave wolves symbolic weight. Among some Native American traditions, the wolf is teacher and pathfinder, showing humans how to live in kinship with the pack. In Norse mythology, wolves flanked the sky, devouring sun and moon at the world's end. These wolves may not have been called dire, yet the echo of the ancient predator lingers in their ferocity, their relentless hunger, their aura of inevitability. Imagine hearing those stories with the night pressing against the door, the faint howl of a real wolf drifting from the forest, and feeling that shiver down your spine that tells you the old spirits have not entirely faded. Psychologically, the direwolf stirs something deep. It represents both what we fear and what we long for: strength, loyalty, the raw force of survival. Its growl is the growl of hunger inside us, the reminder that once we too were prey and predator, balanced on the knife edge of extinction. When we dream of wolves, part of us dreams of the direwolf, the ancestor of danger itself. Imagine waking from such a dream, your skin damp with sweat, your ears straining in the dark as though expecting the scrape of claws just outside your door. The sensory memory of the direwolf is easy to conjure even without having seen one. Sight, broad shoulders, fur bristling like pine needles, teeth yellowed with wear. Sound, the low, resonant growl of an animal that weighed as much as a man, the chorus of a pack rolling across frozen plains. Touch, the roughness of fur tangled with ice, the press of muscle beneath it, the cold breath of a predator, so near your cheek you can feel it stir the hairs on your skin. Smell, musk, blood, damp soil churned beneath paws. Taste, the copper tang of meat, the bitter smoke of fire meant to keep them away. These details live in our minds because they once lived in the world. Even now, the legacy of the direwolf runs through popular imagination. They appear in novels, games, and films, towering larger than life, companions to heroes or monsters in their own right. They are symbols of power, ferocity, and loyalty to the pack. The irony is that in life, the direwolf was not mystical. It was an animal bound by hunger and chance. Yet in death, it transcended, stepping into the realm of myth where creatures do not age or vanish. Consider the parallel. Humans survived by telling stories, weaving meaning around bone and shadow. The direwolf survived not in body, but in those very stories. Perhaps that is its truest legacy. Not the hunts it made, not the prey it felled, but the way its absence sharpened our imagination. When something immense is taken from the world, humans fill the gap with myth, and the direwolf became larger in our minds than it ever was in flesh. Now picture yourself walking alone in a twilight forest. The air is still, the smell of damp leaves heavy around you. Every crack of a twig underfoot sounds too loud. You pause, listening, and in that pause your mind conjures it. The direwolf, watching from the shadows, amber eyes glowing faintly. You know it cannot be there, time has taken it away, but your body tenses as though it might. That reflex, that tremor of belief, is proof enough of its legacy. In a way, the direwolf is always beside us, reminding us of the thin line between survival and disappearance. It whispers of a past when humans were not masters of the world, but fragile creatures sharing the night with predators who could end them in a heartbeat. It also whispers of resilience, of the strength found in unity, of the stories that keep memory alive. Its paw prints may no longer press into snow, but they press into the soil of our collective mind. And so the direwolf continues, not as bone, not as flesh, but as shadow, symbol, and story. It lives in the firelight of imagination, in the quiet dread of forests, in the howl that drifts across distant hills and stirs something ancient within. The question that began with its bones, why does the direwolf still haunt us, finds its answer here, because it is not gone. It has merely changed its shape, stepping from the earth into the endless wilderness of memory. Picture yourself standing in a vast wilderness long before the names of places were written down. The air is sharper, cleaner, carrying with it the faint musk of pine resin and damp earth. A cold wind moves through the grassland like a breath from an unseen mouth, bending the stalks in silent waves. In that silence, a question lingers. How did the direwolf, a creature of bone and sinew, hunger and instinct, rise to become the apex among predators? The answer isn't simple. It is a story woven from survival, blood, and the deep understanding between humans and the world that surrounded them. To tell it, we must walk back into the twilight of the Pleistocene, when glaciers carved their way across continents, and the land was as much a battlefield as it was a cradle of life. Imagine the earth colder, the nights longer, and the beasts larger than anything you've ever known. Mastodons, giant bison, saber-toothed cats, all locked in a cycle of pursuit and flight. Into this harsh and unyielding stage, the direwolf stepped not as the biggest, not as the fastest, but as something else entirely. Their power lay in unity. One direwolf alone was a formidable creature, with jaws built for crushing bone and a body hewn from muscle. But together, as a pack, they were thunder rolling across the plains. Hunters who witnessed them described the sound as a low rush, like waves breaking on distant rocks, the pad of dozens of paws moving in rhythm. The sight would have been awe-striking, amber eyes catching the moonlight, shoulders rolling like storm clouds, their breath steaming in the air. But strength is never just muscle and tooth, it is strategy. The direwolves learned to endure the chase. While a saber-toothed cat might lunge and tear, its power burned bright and fast, like a flame snuffed out in seconds. The direwolf's gift was patience. They could wear down their prey, hounding it across miles of frozen ground until exhaustion set in. Picture the great bison, its flanks heaving, each step heavier than the last. The direwolves circled, not rushing, not reckless, but certain. The moment of collapse was inevitable, and when it came, the wolves moved in with a swiftness that ended the struggle. For the humans who shared the land, these predators were both terror and teacher. A campfire flickering at the edge of a frozen river might keep them at bay, but the eyes beyond the firelight were never forgotten. Some hunters feared them, whispering that the direwolves carried the spirits of ancestors too restless to sleep. Others watched closely, learning. The strategy of the hunt, the patience, the cooperation, the endurance, these were lessons that could be mirrored. Imagine the taste of smoked meat in the cold, the way it lingers on the tongue when every calorie matters. To secure such a meal was to survive another week. And sometimes, when the direwolves had brought down a kill, humans followed in their wake, scavenging what was left. Bones cracked open for marrow, sinew stripped for thread, hides stretched for warmth. The direwolves, unknowingly, were shaping human survival as much as they shaped the land itself. But there was more than practicality. To live alongside a creature so powerful demanded symbols. The direwolf became more than flesh. It became a figure in the stories whispered beneath the stars. In charcoal drawings on cave walls, wolves were painted not as background, but as figures of power. Their howls were woven into songs that carried through valleys, their endurance into the rituals of hunters. To wear a wolf's tooth was not only protection, it was a claim, a borrowing of the wolf's relentless spirit. Listen, if you will, to the silence that comes just before a wolf pack howls. It is a silence that feels alive, humming with anticipation. Then the sound breaks, a long, rising note that seems to stretch the night itself. That sound carried far, sometimes for miles, telling all within reach. We are here, and we are many. For early humans huddled by firelight, the howl could chill the bones. Yet, in time, that same sound became something else, a reminder of kinship, of the wild rhythm that humans too shared. To touch the fur of a wolf pelt, coarse yet warm, was to hold the wilderness in your hands. It had the faint tang of iron, blood worked into the fibers from hunts gone by. For some, the pelt was sacred, worn by shamans who claimed it bridged the human body and the wolf spirit. It was said that by wearing such a skin, one might move unseen, strike with the same precision, endure with the same hunger. And yet, survival meant competition as much as admiration. The direwolf's reign as apex was not eternal. Change crept slowly, then all at once. The great prey they relied upon began to vanish. Mammoths fell, bison thinned, the landscape shifted. The direwolves, with their heavy bones and their reliance on great hunts, faced a dwindling stage. Meanwhile, smaller wolves, gray wolves, were quicker to adapt, turning their focus toward smaller prey, toward flexibility. Humans, too, were shifting. Where once they feared the direwolf, they began to notice the gray wolf's pliability. They were less daunting, more curious, and over time, bonds were formed that reshaped the future. The direwolf remained in the stories, in the symbols, in the echoes of firelight tales. But on the land itself, the apex crown began to slip. Still, their legacy endured. Even now, when you hear the howl of a wolf carried by the wind, there is something older within it, a resonance from the direwolf, from the pack that once ruled unchallenged. Imagine yourself standing in a darkened forest today, a chill in the air, the scent of pine sharp in your nostrils. You hear that call, long and low, and for a moment the present falls away. You are back among the shadows of giants, when survival was a balance of fear and reverence, and the direwolf stood tall among predators. Their rise was not simply about fangs or numbers. It was about unity, about endurance, about embodying the very rhythm of survival. For humans, the direwolf was both rival and inspiration, shaping the way our ancestors hunted, the way they told stories, the way they understood strength. And though their bones lie silent in tar pits and buried valleys, their spirit runs still. In the wolves of today, in the myths we carry, in the restless echo of every howl that stretches into the night. So the story continues, not with an end, but with a thread pulled forward. The direwolf, apex among predators, lives on in memory and in the way we see ourselves against the wilderness. Picture the firelight flickering on ancient stone. Picture the sound of paws thundering across the earth. Picture the taste of marrow, the smell of smoke, the touch of fur. The direwolf was more than a beast. It was a mirror of survival itself, and its shadow still walks with us through the silence of the wild. Picture yourself in a world where the air carries the cold bite of ice, and the ground shivers beneath glaciers inching slowly across the land. The sky is pale with winter light, a half-sun hanging low as if weighed down by the age of the earth itself. Across these frozen plains, shapes move, giants of bone and fur, creatures that would seem mythic if you had not already seen them breathing, snorting, and pawing at the frozen earth. And among them, loping with heavy paws and a hunger sharpened by cold, comes the direwolf. But here is the question that stirs curiosity even before sleep softens your eyes. Was the direwolf truly master of its icy realm, or did it live under the constant challenge of other predators equally fierce, equally clever, equally determined to survive? The story of the direwolf is not only about its strength. It is about the contests it faced, silent and brutal struggles in forests thick with pine resin, on grasslands crackling with frost, by rivers where the ice broke apart and carried away the unlucky. Each rival it met was a mirror, testing the limits of its endurance, testing the bonds of its pack, forcing it to refine its strategies. Imagine standing at the edge of such a contest. The ground smells of blood carried on the wind. Your ears catch the guttural growl of direwolves forming a circle, shoulders pressed close, breath steaming in the air. Across from them, another shape prowls forward, a saber-toothed cat, muscles coiled under fur patterned in tawny gold, its canines gleaming like ivory blades. Here lies one of the direwolf's greatest rivals, the Smilodon fatalis. The saber-tooth was not built for long pursuits. It was a creature of ambush, its massive forelimbs gripping prey with the weight of a falling tree. The direwolf, by contrast, was endurance made flesh, built to chase across miles of open steppe until the quarry stumbled. Their rivalry was not constant battle, but it unfolded in the shadows of every hunt. When the direwolves brought down a bison, they knew well the smell of their kill would drift on the wind, calling the saber-tooth. And when the cat appeared, there was no guarantee the wolves could keep what they had earned. Picture the clash, the direwolves yelping, darting forward in numbers, their teeth snapping in waves, while the saber-tooth roars low, swiping with a paw heavy enough to knock a wolf sprawling. The noise is deafening, a mixture of snarls and cracking bones, the air metallic with the taste of blood. Sometimes the pack held its ground. Sometimes the cat walked away with the kill, its muzzle wet, leaving only scraps behind for the wolves. And the direwolf had other rivals. Turn now to the shadow of the short-faced bear, Arctidus simus, a titan that towered above nearly every creature of the Ice Age. To see one crest a hill would be like seeing a moving wall of fur, its smell reaching you before its bulk did, a musky scent of dominance and rot. These bears were not subtle hunters. They were thieves, opportunists. Where meat was, they came. Imagine the frustration of the direwolf pack, after chasing a giant sloth until exhaustion tipped it into defeat, only to see the hulking form of the bear approach. The ground seems to tilt under its weight. Its jaws gape, not in challenge but in certainty, as though the wolves' efforts meant nothing at all. The wolves would pace, ears flat, snarling in defiance, but deep in their bodies they knew. One swipe of that massive paw could break a spine. Survival demanded retreat. The pack lived to hunt again only by yielding. The direwolf's rivals were not only predators of tooth and claw. Sometimes their challengers were the great cats that still live today, ancestors of lions, jaguars, and cougars, each adapted to stalk or to ambush. Picture a shadow slipping silently through the undergrowth, the faint musk of a cat brushing your nose before you see the flick of its tail. To a lone wolf, such a meeting could be final. But to the pack, it was another test of unity. What is striking in all these rivalries is not simply the violence, but the way they shape behavior. The direwolf's answer to the saber-tooth's power was numbers. The direwolf's answer to the bear's size was endurance, patience, and the willingness to yield for another chance. These were not only survival tactics, they were lessons in humility and cooperation, etched into the memory of the species. If you close your eyes, you can almost feel the texture of this ancient world. The crunch of frost underfoot, the resin-rich smoke of pines burned by lightning, the tang of marrow fat as wolves tore at a bone after a long hunt. These were not sterile landscapes but places of sound and scent, where every sense was sharpened for survival. Humans, too, walked among these predators, and they watched. They saw direwolves circling the giants of the plains, and they drew meaning from the sight. In caves and firelit shelters, the direwolf became more than a beast. It became a symbol of the wild struggle, a story told by hunters to their children, that no creature, no matter how strong, lives without rivals. Some painted wolves in ochre on stone walls, not simply as depictions but as reminders, that strength lies in unity, that even the direwolf bows before greater forces. Consider what it must have felt like to hear the echoes of these predators at night, the long, rolling howl of direwolves weaving through valleys like smoke, answered by the deep coughing roar of a saber-tooth. The sound would crawl under your skin, a reminder that sleep was never truly safe. Yet in that fear was also reverence, a sense that life was part of a larger contest, and humans, like wolves, must band together if they hoped to endure. Sometimes the contests ended in silence rather than battle. A pack of direwolves might approach a fresh kill, smell the musky scent of a bear, and turn away. That decision, the choice to survive rather than die defending a carcass, carries a quiet dignity. It whispers a truth still relevant today. Not every fight must be fought, not every prize is worth the cost. And still, there were moments when direwolves triumphed. Picture a herd of horses panicked into a river, hooves thrashing as water foams white. The wolves surge in, gripping legs, pulling one down. Before the saber-tooth can arrive, the pack feasts, muzzles buried in warmth that steams in the cold. For a brief moment, they are not rivals of anyone, only victors in the eternal chase. The taste is iron-rich, intoxicating, and the memory of it fuels them for the next battle. As centuries passed, the balance shifted. The climate warmed. Prey animals vanished or grew scarcer. Rivals changed their ranges. And humans, once mere observers, became rivals themselves, hunters with weapons that pierced skin at a distance, with fire that cleared forests, with strategies that echoed the wolves' own cooperation. In some places, direwolves must have felt the strange weight of human competition, more than even the saber-tooth's claws or the bear's looming shadow. To walk through the natural museums of today, to look into the sockets of direwolf skulls found in the tar pits, is to feel that contest echoing. Their bones tell stories of injuries healed and battles endured. Their teeth, worn and cracked, tell of meals hard won and sometimes stolen. And in the company of those bones lie the remains of rivals, saber teeth curved like ivory scythes, bare bones so massive they seem carved from tree trunks. The tar pits preserve not only death, but the struggle itself. If you let your imagination drift, you can step into that silence. The smell of tar rising, sticky and acrid. The faint buzzing of flies in summer heat. Bones gleaming pale against the black. You can almost hear the growls that once filled the air, now muted by centuries but alive in the stones. The direwolf did not win every fight. It did not even survive the changing world. But perhaps that is not failure. Perhaps the direwolf story is a lesson about the nature of rivalry itself. That strength is tested, refined, and sometimes undone by the presence of others who push against it. And even in loss, something remains. The memory of howling voices that once rose together, the shape of their paw prints fossilized in earth, the echo of their contests woven into our stories. And so, when we think of rivals that challenge the direwolf, we are not only imagining predators fighting over flesh in the snow. We are imagining the ancient drama of life itself, how every creature finds its place not alone, but in relation to others, foes, allies, and strangers alike. The direwolf's growl was sharpened by the roar of the saber-tooth, its endurance hardened by the looming bear, its unity reinforced by the ever-present threat of loss. If you step outside on a winter night and hear the distant howl of modern wolves carried on the wind, you might feel a thread stretching backward. That sound is both present and ancient. It carries not just the voice of living wolves, but the memory of direwolves who once shared the land with rivals mighty enough to test their very existence. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the silence before the clash, the hot breath of predators in the frozen air, the taste of blood iron on the wind, the shiver of fur standing against the cold. Imagine the moment when survival hung on a choice, to fight, to flee, or to endure. These were the moments that defined the direwolf, that wove its story into the fabric of the Ice Age. And though the world has changed, that story still lingers, waiting to be told again whenever we listen to the wild. Picture yourself standing on a windswept plain, the air sharp with the bite of endless winter. Snow drifts across a frozen land where mammoths tread heavy paths and bison press close for warmth. In this world, every shadow, every sound, could mean survival or ruin. And in the hush of that Ice Age silence comes the question, who held the balance of life and death across this frozen wilderness? The answer moves low to the ground, broad-shouldered and heavy-jawed, the direwolf. The direwolf was not a creature of fantasy, though its very name suggests it. It lived, breathed, and hunted in the same winds that filled the lungs of our own ancestors. They were larger than the wolves we know today, with skulls thick and teeth built not for delicate cuts, but for crushing through bone. Imagine their paws pressing into snow, leaving prints that carried the weight of an entire pack's hunger. This was not just a predator, it was a presence that shaped everything around it. To understand its role in the Ice Age, you must feel the rhythm of the land. Grasslands stretched further than the eye could see, broken by clusters of spruce and aspen, by rivers frozen at the edges but rushing still beneath the surface. The herds, horses, camels, mastodons, ground sloths, were the heartbeat of the plains. But herds cannot move without drawing eyes upon them. The direwolves watched from ridgelines, ears twitching to the low thunder of hooves. Their hunger was not just for meat, but for the survival of their own kind. Now imagine a kill. Close your eyes and listen. The rush of many paws beating snow into dust, the startled cry of a bison scattering from its herd, the guttural growls as bodies collide. The air would smell of sweat and iron, breath steaming in great clouds. You might taste the grit of kicked-up earth in your mouth as you crouch, hiding from the frenzy. It was a symphony of survival, and when it was over, the direwolves ate not only for themselves but for the ravens, the smaller scavengers, even for the soil that would take the bones. Death in the Ice Age was not wasteful, it was an exchange. Yet there was always a problem. Packs needed meat, and the herds were not endless. Winters dragged longer than expected. When prey grew scarce, what was a direwolf to do? Some turned to carcasses already claimed, braving the spears of saber-tooths or the claws of giant short-faced bears. Others pressed closer to human fires, their eyes glowing from the treeline. And here the story becomes tangled with ours. For humans, the direwolf was both nightmare and teacher. Picture yourself in a small band of hunter-gatherers, your campfire sending sparks into the frost-bitten night. The silence is broken by howls rolling across the valley, low, resonant, and many-throated. The sound presses against your chest like the weight of the dark itself. Fear rises, yes, but so does understanding. Here is a creature that moves as you do, bound not by strength alone, but by cooperation. They stalk together, flank together, strike together. In their reflection, people saw their own path to survival. In this way, direwolves shaped more than ecosystems, they shaped imaginations. To hunt mammoths, humans too needed patience, coordination, the courage to face beasts that towered above them. To protect their own, humans needed the same loyalty that bound the direwolf pack. Around the fire, stories would have been told. The direwolf, a shadow on the snow, a rival, an emblem of endurance. Children would listen, their ears straining against the night, knowing those glowing eyes were never far. It is easy to forget the senses of those lives, but they are what anchor us. The crunch of ice underfoot, the raw sting of smoke when greenwood is burned, the oily taste of marrow when bones are cracked open, desperate not to waste a scrap. In such a world, the direwolf was not just predator, it was part of the very air. Without it, prey would have bred unchecked, grasslands stripped bare, rivers choked with mud. With it, balance returned, and the circle held steady. But balance is fragile. The end of the Ice Age came not with a roar, but with a slow warming. Forests crept back into the grasslands, prey shifted, and the direwolf, specialized, powerful, yet tied so closely to the cold world it knew, found itself outmatched. Gray wolves, more adaptable, thinner, swifter, began to thrive where the direwolves faltered. The heavy jaws that once cracked bone with ease became a burden when swifter prey demanded speed and agility. One by one, packs dwindled, and their howls faded from valleys where they had ruled for millennia. Still, traces linger. In tar pits like those of La Brea, direwolf bones lie in tangled heaps, jaws locked in silent growls, ribs gnawed, paws crossed forever in the dance of predator and prey. To walk among those fossils is to feel the echo of their world. The smell of tar, thick and acrid, fills your nose, and the sheen of black pools reflects the bones of 1,000 years. You might hear the imagined cries of a trapped horse, the answering chorus of wolves rushing to feast, only to be swallowed themselves. The earth remembers, even when the living do not. Yet perhaps the most curious role of the direwolf is what it left behind inside us. The wolf still runs at the edges of human thought, the howling guardian, the dangerous rival, the symbol of wilderness untamed. Stories of wolves weave through cultures across the world, from protectors of children to devourers of the lost. Though the direwolf itself is gone, its shadow lingers in myth. When people drew hunting scenes on cave walls, perhaps the wolves they etched were not only companions but memories of a mightier beast, a rival that demanded respect. Imagine, then, that you are one of those early painters, crouching in the flicker of torchlight, ochre staining your fingers. You draw not simply an animal but an idea, a memory of glowing eyes beyond the fire, the press of paws around a carcass, the certainty that you were never alone on the plain. The direwolf became a story, and stories are harder to kill than flesh. Even today, in the marrow of our imagination, the direwolf carries weight. When we speak of wolves in legends, when we write them into epics or dress them in names fit for kings, we are whispering echoes of a predator that shaped the Ice Age itself. Though its body is gone, the ecosystem it balanced, the lessons it taught, still ripple outward. Our domesticated dogs, curled beside us, carry faint echoes of that wild ancestry. Their loyalty, their sharp ears, their hunger for the hunt, threads tied back to packs that once ruled icy plains. So when you step outside on a cold night and hear the cry of a wolf, let your mind wander further back, into a time when the howl was deeper, the shadow broader, the hunger sharper. Let yourself feel the chill of that ancient wind, taste the tang of bone-cracked marrow, see the shimmer of eyes in the dark. The direwolf's role was never just to kill. It was to bind together the lives of prey and predator, of human and beast, of balance and change. The Ice Age may be gone, but the story continues, carried in fossils, in firelit tales, in the way we still turn our heads when a wolf calls across the night. The direwolf reminds us that every ecosystem is a woven fabric, threads pulled tight by predator and prey alike. And though the great beast itself has slipped into silence, its role endures, etched not just in bones beneath the earth, but in the stories we cannot help but tell. Picture yourself standing on the edge of a clearing, a pale winter moon shining through the branches, the night air biting at your cheeks. The fire at your back is warm, but does not comfort you. For beyond the glow, where the forest grows thick and the shadows lean long, a sound rises. A deep, mournful call, half growl, half song, rolling through the dark. It is a sound so ancient and heavy it seems carved from the bones of the earth itself. The question that stirs in your chest is one our ancestors must have whispered countless times. What was it like to meet the mighty direwolf face to face? The direwolf, Canis dirus, was no mere storybook beast. For thousands of years it walked the same frozen valleys and wooded plains that humans hunted, camped, and dreamed upon. Larger than the wolves we know today, with jaws built for crushing bone, direwolves prowled the Ice Age world alongside mammoths, giant sloths, and saber-toothed cats. They were real, flesh and blood, yet in memory they have become something more, shadows that stalk the edges of imagination. Imagine the silence of a Paleolithic camp. A ring of stones surrounds a fire, its flames licking the darkness. Meat roasts slowly on a spit, its fat hissing and crackling, sending a sharp, greasy scent into the cold air. Families huddle close, fur pelts wrapped around shoulders, the taste of smoke clinging to their tongues. Then, without warning, the night shifts. Branches snap beyond the circle of firelight. Low growls weave through the trees, too many to count. Eyes glitter, catching the flames. You realize you are not alone. The direwolf did not hunt like the lone predator of fairy tales. It moved in numbers, a chorus of muscle and fur, a pack bound by silent understanding. When they encircled prey, the earth itself seemed to listen. To our ancestors, who lived by the thin line between feast and famine, such encounters meant danger and awe in equal measure. They were not simply predators, they were rivals, kin in hunger and survival. Practical wisdom grew from these meetings. Hunters learned to bank their fires high, to keep watch in pairs, to scatter food scraps far from the sleeping ground. Some tribes carried burning branches as they moved through wolf country, the flames snapping and spitting like living guardians. Others beat drums or carved whistles to mimic the cries of larger beasts, hoping to warn the direwolves away. Survival meant more than strength. It meant imagination, the ability to think as a wolf might, to guess its next move. But there was more than fear. There was fascination, too. To see direwolves working together in the hunt, muscles rippling, paws pounding the frozen ground, their voices rising in layered howls, was to see cooperation written in flesh. Humans began to read themselves in these animals. Packs mirrored families, loyalty mirrored kinship, the sharing of the kill mirrored the sharing of bread and fire. Around the flames, stories grew, that the wolf was a teacher, that it carried the soul of the warrior, that it walked between the world of men and the world of spirits. Picture a child sitting close to their mother, wide-eyed as an elder speaks. The elder's voice is low, heavy with memory. When you hear the wolves, you are hearing your brothers of the night. Respect them, or they will take what you love. The child shivers, not from cold but from the weight of the lesson. To know that the wilderness holds not just threats but symbols, guides, shadows that reflect us back to ourselves. That was a gift as much as a warning. Psychologically, an encounter with a direwolf must have been overwhelming. Imagine the weight of its gaze, golden eyes fixed upon you from the brush. Your skin prickles, every hair standing upright. You taste metal in your mouth, the sharp tang of adrenaline. The air is thick with the musky, wild smell of the animal, a scent that clings to memory long after the beast has vanished. And above all, the sound, the snapping of twigs under padded paws, the rhythmic panting, the layered chorus of howls that ripple through your bones like thunder. For a hunter facing such a presence, courage was not the absence of fear, it was learning to move despite it. In some cultures, bones of direwolves were found buried near human settlements, perhaps trophies of victory, perhaps tokens of respect. Teeth strung into necklaces rattled softly against the chest, a reminder of what had been faced and survived. Skulls placed near hearths may have been guardians, their empty sockets watching over the living. Symbol and flesh blurred until the direwolf became a creature of both earth and story. Now imagine standing with a group of hunters at dawn. Frost sparkles on the grass, and your breath hangs in pale clouds. You carry a spear tipped with stone, its edge sharp but fragile. Ahead, the trail of a bison herd stretches through the snow, dark hooves stamping paths into the earth. Yet you are not alone in following it. A distant chorus tells you the direwolves have found the same trail. You grip your weapon tighter, not knowing whether today you will be hunter or hunted. In that uncertainty lies the strange kinship between humans and wolves, both drawn by hunger, both bound by the rhythm of the chase. What is striking, looking back, is not just the danger but the endurance. Humans adapted, found ways to live alongside these predators, and even to learn from them. In time, smaller wolves, cousins of the direwolf, drew nearer to human fires. A scrap of meat tossed here, a wary truce there. From such moments began a slow weaving of trust that would, millennia later, give us the dog. And so the direwolf, though it vanished, left its echo in every bark that greets us today, every wagging tail that curls at the foot of our beds. Picture the contrast, a direwolf's crushing jaws clamped around the bones of a giant sloth, then the gentle nudge of a domesticated pup against a child's hand. The line between terror and tenderness is not as wide as it seems. Both are born of closeness, of shared ground and mutual need. The direwolf, in its might, was a mirror of what humanity feared and hoped for in itself: strength, loyalty, and the sharp reminder that survival is never solitary. When you close your eyes now and imagine the Ice Age night, you may hear echoes. The wind through the pines sounds almost like distant howls. The crunch of your boots on snow recalls padded paws circling in the dark. Though the direwolf is gone, the memory lingers in our stories, in the symbols we still wear, in the way we watch the wilderness with both reverence and unease. It is not a ghost in the sense of spirits, but in the sense of influence, a shadow that shaped the path of humankind. The problem our ancestors faced, how to live beside such power without being consumed by it, is not so distant from our own lives. We too live alongside forces larger than ourselves, wild currents of nature and time that cannot be tamed, only respected. The direwolf is a reminder that humanity did not rise in isolation. It rose by facing and sometimes befriending the wild. And so, when you next hear a dog howl at the night, or feel the hush of the forest settle heavy around you, you might imagine those ancient encounters. The firelight flickering, the smell of meat and smoke, the eyes at the edge of the clearing. You might imagine the courage it took to step forward, spear in hand, knowing the pack was watching. You might imagine, just for a moment, the silence that followed, the strange mix of relief and sorrow when the howls faded into the distance. The direwolf lives on in that silence, in that memory of power, in that thin line between fear and kinship. It is a line we still walk, whether in the wilderness of the past or the wilderness of our own making today.